Uh, Hold on. First time chatter. Let's see. Plushbox says, looking into interesting videos. Otherwise, I'd be happy to share some cool free games. Uh, is this an ad? I don't know if that's an ad, but we shall continue with this. Feel free to continue talking if you want, but we're just going to be doing this for right now. No, just hanging. Oh, but fair enough. Feel free to hang out for as long as you want, man. So yeah, again, if you want to, yeah, basically, yeah, you're correct on that. Plush box. It is basically pirate software syndrome, but from nobody's on fucking X and Blue Sky. Yeah, I mean, again, I actually agree with you here. Plushbox says, not only give an inch, they take a mile. I mean, that is true. That's why you never bend the knee because it's never going to be enough for them. Uh, because they're totalitarian. They don't. It's not just about like the external authority overriding your internal authority. That that'd be authoritarianism. They want total control over you. It's that malicious feminine operation because we have like every one of us has masculine and feminine operations, the anima and the animus. Um, that that malicious thing. I used to work with a group of women. One thing that you would see is there's this malicious thing that women often do when they're more socially oriented and they're not more internally oriented, where they will see if they can get someone to admit to something that they know is not true, but get them to admit that it is true. And it's a sense of power that those particular individuals get. Again, they don't really care if you believe this thing, they care if you bend the knee. That way they can uh I mean, yeah, fair enough. I That's an entirely reasonable position to take. I think I've hold on. I actually talked about this exact issue and the metaphysics underlying that in a previous video. Um but yeah, because ultimately, again, the left is a Hegelian project, and the Hegelian worldviews are about the end of the world. They are about the end of history, what the purpose of history is. History is leading up to a moment, and we have an obligation to push history forward into that moment. And so anything that pushes away from that moment is fundamentally like malevolent, it's evil. And ultimately with these Hegelian movements, since they move in the dialectic of synthesis and antithesis, you end up getting this idea that in order to progress, you have to hold these two opposites together and mash them together into an undifferentiated thing that is both sides at the same time. So you begin with a binary thinking, and then you have to obliterate that binary thinking in the first place, and which ends up making thinking impossible. Um, so and like with all of these individuals, you'll find again, like if you actually do a deep dive into them, they're all species wide, like suicide pacts. To be perfectly honest, you can't change the nature of man without destroying what man is, because man is his nature. So if you destroy the nature of man, you destroy man in himself. That's not exactly a hard thing to understand, but they constantly fucking want to do it. Uh, that's what the socialist man at the end of history is. It is, you know, uh, posed as if it's man having rediscovered himself in Eden when it's actually man becoming creator of his own species being and thereby obliterating like his own essence. So whatever that is, that cosmic Ubermensch is no longer human in any meaningful way. Um, which is, by the way, why a lot of these groups hate metaphysics. Uh, because if you actually understand metaphysics, then the entire project breaks down. Uh, so yeah, uh, I actually straight up forgot where I was talking about. Oh yeah, this thing. Um, sorry, I get onto tangents. Um, but let's see. Kind of plush box. So I'm working from a more metaphysical, not a religious standpoint. My thesis is that the left wing ideology, and a number of ideologies actually have their structural origin from religious roots. So for example, if you did a structural analysis, for example, of Hegelianism, you will find that there are a number of ideas that were pulled straight from specifically Hermeticism and Kabbalah. And that's because Hermeticism and Kabbalah are easy to. They're actually quite amendable to being folded into novel systems. And just because the explicit wording of religious language is removed from these doesn't change the fact that they operate as if they are religious systems. Um, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, I'm free to listen to you. All right, what do you got for me? I apologize if it takes me a bit to respond to you in the video because I have a 30-second delay operating. So you know, uh, all right. Yeah, uh, it's again the timing thing is a little awkward for me because I have the 30-second delay and I'm not entirely used to the whole back and forth like in real time thing. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to fix that at some point. But yeah, if you want to tell me like what your take on this is, I'm glad to hear it. But to answer your question, uh, let's see. Oh yeah, no, I mean it is sometimes I do actually just genuinely miss like a comment that's being said because I'm kind of just like lost in the thing I'm talking about. But yeah, no, I also have a 30-second delay on. So I don't know how to turn that off on the program I'm using. So again, if it takes me a moment to get to what y'all say, I'm not trying to ignore y'all. It's just I literally won't see it for at least 30 seconds after y'all post. Or I mean, like I will see it when you post, but I won't be able. My response won't be showing till like 30 seconds after. That's actually more accurate to what happens. Let's see. Uh, let's see. Plushbox says all people experience the world in their own sense, and this sense should be given the benefit of the doubt. It is my belief that all religions hold a sense of uniformity through filtering. Be it science or religion, a greater power exists. Be it science or religion. Um, so those are like okay. So those are epistemological frameworks. So those are frameworks of knowledge. Those don't refer to beings in and of themselves. But I mean, yeah, they do serve different epistemological functions. Uh, how one interprets is fine. Um, I will admit I don't regard all worldviews, whether they be ideological or religious, to be equal. I actually have a complete set, for example, of Sunni hadiths, and I have 5 Qurans, and I have opinions on, for example, Islam that are fairly detailed about specific issues. And I will say that also having studied Catholicism and having studied, for example, what's another Tenrikyo, which is a Japanese religion. The religions are not equal. Some religions are much more anti-human than others, and a lot of their disagreements actually kind of make sense when you understand them from like the root epistemology that they're working with. That doesn't make them equally plausible, but it does make them understandable to an outsider. So like there's nothing actually magical going on with any of these religions. Let's see, I cannot pretend to know if such an entity is physical or not. Well, I think we can know, but also I think a dose of agnosticism and like humility is healthy. Like, can we know with absolute certainty? Probably not. But I think that the information that we can reason to through our sense perception and reasoning from our sense perception, because that's where all our information comes from. Uh, I think you could make reasonable arguments that there is no God, or that reasonable arguments that there is a God. Many of the classical arguments for God's existence, for example, actually do are fairly persuasive. And they're the only atheistic worldview that I've ever talked to that seems to have a coherent argument against these is, funny enough, the one atheist movement that a lot of people really don't want to consider, and that's the objectivist movement because they reason from first principles. And their first principles are, existence exists, and that there's a dichotomy between existence and consciousness. Let's see. Uh, let's see. I prefer the world of science, but I will not discount the concept of mysticism. Uh, Again, I think we might be using slightly different terms here. I would have to, I'd have to talk to you later about like what specifically you mean about mysticism because different people use that term differently. I'm not a very mystical person. I do know quite a bit about religion, and I have a great deal of respect for example, the classical theists. And I think that their beliefs are reasonable. Like, I think that they have good reasons to believe God exists, but I also don't exactly know how to square the circle with the objectivist claims that are actually fairly reasonable as well. Like, if there's any like atheist argument that has ever given me pause to think about whether or not God exists, it was the objectivists who came up with that argument. It wasn't anyone else. Which is why I respect objectivists, because like they're the only atheists who have ever made me pause and think, "Oh shit, hold on, I actually don't know how to actually address that question." Um, but yeah, okay, fair enough. So yeah, to be clear, I'm not saying that like you have to believe religion is true or anything like this to understand this. Uh, I'm just saying that these people are operating under religious structures, even if they claim that they don't believe in God, because the structure of their belief didn't come from philosophy. It came from mystical occult networks, specifically that were rooted in Kabbalah and in Hegelianism. That's why it's a dialectical framework, because that's the underlying logical structure of those particular worldviews. So that's what I'm getting at here, is that these people act like religious people because they are they are implicitly religious, even though their religion is oriented to a different like supreme goal than, for example, Christianity is. It would be closer to Buddhism, but Buddhism isn't this, nihilistic power play religion either, even though their whole goal is extinction through nirvana. See, there is a benefit to the values regardless. I mean, yeah, I mean, even if, for example, like someone has a incorrect belief, they can still, do good, right? People can actually do good things despite being wrong. This is why, it's not just the what a person believes, but the content of their character. I'll take, for example, a good-natured atheist, or a good-natured, Muslim over someone who is claiming to be, who may be objectively right in facts, but is also a demonstrably evil person because they don't actually, have a good character. That is a thing that also happens. Sometimes people do bad things because they prefer the bad things over the good things. Um, right. um, yeah, honestly, the social contract is kind of just a secular magic, to be perfectly honest. It's a series of signs and symbols that end up changing the way people view the world, which is the function of magic. People think magic is like you change reality around you, when historically speaking, magic has always been about changing the perception of the people around you. And I mean, fundamentally speaking, yeah, if that's how you define magic, then yeah, magic is a thing that exists all over the place. It's just the way you use magic is you use rhetoric, you use sophistry, and you use con man epistemology. If you combine those three things, a lot of the thing you can get people to do a lot of things if they're not critically thinking, because that's how, historically speaking, cult leaders have acted. Oh, that's fair. I enjoy these conversations, to be perfectly honest. Like, while I am recording, I can also just cut this conversation out and then upload that as its own video. To be perfectly honest, if it's a good conversation, so it doesn't really bother me. I have to use the editing programs anyway, so you know. But yeah, so again, just to be clear, that's my thesis: is that even though these people will say they're not religious, the genealogy of their ideas and the structure of the way they behave and what they actually believe, even though they don't use language that would be familiar to an Abrahamic religion or a pagan religion, it is functionally still religious. Like the whole conversation, for example, about like systems. Like, oh, we have all these interlocking systems of oppression. Well, I can't point to a system. It's like when we're talking about, like, for example, the laws of physics, we're not talking about a thing that exists in nature. We're talking about a description of how things in nature act, right? So it's like there's no place where the speed of light exists. The speed of light is just a description of how light moves. So the reference isn't the speed itself. The reference is the light photon and how it moves in space. But the problem with like these interlocking systems of oppression in, for example, intersectionalist worldviews, is that they exist in a explicitly materialistic framework, but they have no mass. They have no chemical structure. They do not have any of the properties you would expect of a physical entity, but they do have the properties you would expect of a spiritual entity. They are immaterial. They are causally potent. They do not exist in space, but they express themselves in space or time, kind of like a Platonic form, to be perfectly honest. And most tellingly is that, like a pagan deity, they tend to reward people for acting within their bounds, and then they disfavor people for transgressing against them. And it's not even paganism per se. This actually has a lot more in common with Gnosticism, where you have the idea of you have this prime false creator that estranges man from himself in a false reality, and then he delegates this prison to a number of archons or lesser false divinities that keep man imprisoned in this hyper reality. And so the hyper realities would correspond to these systems of oppression, things like capitalism, patriarchy, heteronormativity, all these like the what would you call it? What is it? The critical race theorists. Uh, ah, Whiteness, that's what it was. That's the system of oppression that they talk about. White supremacy. Most people aren't white supremacists, but it's all of these allegedly existing interlocking systems of oppression that act more like spiritual entities than they do any kind of scientific entity. And that's kind of by design, because intersectionality comes from Karl Marx. And when you read Karl Marx's, on the Jewish question, he talks about Judaism, and he very rhetorically, but you can see how this would evolve. He rhetorically declares that the God of the Jew is money, which would therefore make capitalism, and he even makes this identification in the book. Capitalism is Judaism, which is the religion of huckstering. So it's a religion of deception. And you can see how this idea of the God of the, which creates the world, that's why he uses that term, because in this case, it's the God that creates the hyper reality, would be money. And so the system that justifies that God, the religion, would be the system of, the system of oppression itself. So then you have the interrelation between the self-replicating asset, the system of oppression, and you have the ideology justifying it. Um, so sorry, I mean, I do know quite a bit about religion. Uh, Surely one represents God. How would you represent that? Okay, so if there is a God, my personal opinion is that the Thomists are right. Because in order for God to exist, he cannot be the creator of being itself, because if he precedes being, then he can't exist. Because, he doesn't have the property of existence. He cannot precede his own essence, because the essence is what makes you what you are. So if you precede anything that makes something what it is, then again, you just are not that thing. So the Thomists are right in that if God exists, he has the unique property in that his being is his essence, and that he cannot have any parts. So he has to be absolutely simple, since if there were things that composed God, then there are things that precede God, which would by definition make him not God. So, um, subsistent existence, existing of its own necessity, would be my definition of what God is, if such a thing exists. Um, because reality has to precede as like the first principle, because anything that precedes reality or precedes being, you know, it's not real, and it wouldn't exist. So I would be of the opinion that if God exists, the Thomists are probably right in the properties of God. And if God does not exist, then Ayn Rand and her followers are almost certainly correct on the nature of being. Um, so those are the two worldviews that I would definitely be like right in the middle. Oh, that's fine. I enjoyed chat interaction. Again, if I need to, like, I can cut this section of the video out and make it its own thing. I don't, that gives me 2 videos to upload in one day. I'm entirely fine by that. So for the time being, though, I'm gonna continue with the Rev video, because I turned a 4 minute video into like an hour long yap session last time, so I have a tendency to be windy. Free
There's
content.
another.
But let's see. From an interaction standpoint, why am I here? I have no idea, but you're more than welcome to stay if you enjoy the stuff. The algorithm giveth, the algorithm taketh away, right? Okay, I have to ask the question. What do you mean? What does the question mean? Uh, because the reason I say that is because, again, it depends on how people use the word. I tend to try to use language very precisely. So, and I'll catch myself when I'm being a little bit too vague, and I'll try to correct my own ambiguities when I find them. Why, for example, when I said Nazis were socialist earlier in the video, I oh, fair enough. You got me. Actually, fair enough. You did get me. I fell right into that one. Oh my god. Yeah, fair. Yeah. I yeah, fair enough. Uh, you need eeps. I mean, if you need to go to sleep, push box, like, go to sleep. You got to take care of yourself, man. like, don't force yourself to stay up to watch my streams if you don't. Like, you take care of yourself. If you need to sleep, you need to sleep. But I get the feeling. I've oh, fair enough. What? What the fuck? Okay then. I don't. Okay, fair enough. Oh no. Yeah, like,